growing up, because we lived away from a lot of my mom's side of the family, that we'd drive in this Escort they had. I think it was a 1992 Escort coupe, had the vinyl blue interior, and during the summer without AC, the seats would get so hot that you didn't even want to get in it. But I do remember, whether we were driving from Louisville, Kentucky to Atlanta, Georgia, or Austin, Texas, I remember a lot of times we'd have a similar playlist, and one song that always caught my attention and seemed to be a favorite of the family's was Old Susanna. In 1846, when he wrote that song, it ended up selling 100,000 copies. No record in American history had sold more than 2,000. So Old Susanna was, in almost every sense of the word, the first American hit. And in the second line of that song, he talks about having a banjo on his knee, which now we've heard the song so many times. You know, Old Susanna, don't cry for me. I've come from Alabama with a banjo on my knee. And if you think, like, this guy sold 100,000 copies of that song versus 2,000 that had ever been sold, he didn't even know that singer-songwriter was a profession. He didn't even look at it as a profession. He just wrote a song to a woman he was missing, because if you look into his story more, he had actually moved from the South back to Cincinnati to work for his brother as a secretary for his brother's business. And so when he says banjo on his knee, he's essentially saying the thing that I have to give to the world, and the thing that'll bring me closest to you, Susanna, old Susanna. Maybe she wasn't old, I don't know. But the best thing he had to give her was banjo music, but he didn't know where to go for it to be valued. Well, luckily he found that, and there's always a first, and I believe in what I'm doing and the vision that I've been given and the passion that's just buried in my deepest parts of my bones is to help families connect, to help communities grow and nourish one another. And if you look at my family history, I come in with an interesting background. My father's 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 father was a farmer right here in Alabama. And you can see there's a lot of green grass, and there's a lot of room out here. But a lot's changed since the 17 and 1800s, and even the early 1900s. A plane flew over a little while ago. Cars drive past. All these things weren't even here when he was farming. My great-great-great-grandfather and his son, my great-great-grandfather, was born and he farmed. And then my great-grandfather was born and he farmed, all in Alabama. Well, something strange had happened when my grandfather was born and started to come of age. The world had changed. We had created, through technology, tractors and just all kinds of machines that made farming on a larger scale than that had ever been imagined possible. And in effect, small farmers that had a limited amount of land and supplies and capital essentially had to try something else. Because if one farmer could grow 5 acres of corn, and then 10 years later, one farmer could grow 500 acres of corn. If you only had 10 acres, you couldn't be a farmer anymore. And so my grandfather had to try something else. And he would drive from state to state in his truck and an old trailer and pick up old furniture from people. And he'd bring it back to Alabama from Louisiana or Mississippi or Tennessee or even Texas sometimes. And he'd have it sewn up and refurbished, and then he'd sell it. And eventually he ended up opening a furniture store and storage business. And so I like to think that it wasn't farming and that it wasn't his second try but his third try that really made him successful in the sense of the American dream and the ideal small business economy. And then his son, my grandfather's son, would be my father. He had tried the Army, and then he went to college and got a degree, and then became a pharmaceutical sales rep, and then started a business as a road striping company. When they would do the asphalt, just to do the stripes, he'd get state contracts, and then after that he did mobile home sales, and then he did garbage. I remember when he first started the garbage business, he would wake up at 2 in the morning because the truck he had was so old, the brakes didn't work very well, and he couldn't risk hitting somebody, so he'd start at 2 a.m. and he'd run all the routes he had until about 6 or 7 a.m. Come home, kiss his wife and kids, take a shower, put on a suit and tie, and go sell more accounts. And he had to do that for a year. And now he's a state representative where he goes to Montgomery and represents more than an entire county of people on voting on laws and issues that are going to help change society for the better. But my calling is a little bit different than that. I have a unique story. I've been the lowest of the low. I've been near death. I've been addicted. I've nearly died. I've crashed cars and nearly killed me and other people, and I come out of that and somehow gain my bearings. And within a few years, my life changes completely, and next thing I know, I'm pastoring an entire congregation when just a few years earlier I'd never even heard a sermon. And when I started writing my book, I knew that it was for people that wouldn't necessarily come to church. I knew that my writing could reach people that my preaching wouldn't. And in the same sense, modern influencers and this project isn't about talking to those who have a voice already. It's about going out to those who don't have a voice. We get caught up in the day-to-day, the 9 to 5, or like for my wife, the 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. For me, whenever to whenever. You never know. But the point is, modern influencers is about changing society. Because right now, technology is hurting our generation-to-generation communications. Just like we have to try new things, so no one, unless you're, Prince William or somebody like that, knows exactly what they're going to do the day they're born. And it hasn't been that way, ever. This is a new challenge for humanity, and it requires new answers. And so if you're slightly confused about what I'm doing, you're not the only one, but that's because it's something that's never been tried before. It's a solution for a problem that's never been seen before. And I definitely don't think I'm the person to do a lot of this, but I've simply been led to notice it. And by helping others and their ideas get noticed, I want to challenge people from every generation to look at how far they are from 2 generations ago. My mother's side of the family, if you look at my grandmother and grandfather, my mom's mom and dad, and you look at their parents, their mom and dad, and then their mom's mom and dad, so you've got a nice little row of people, and And in both of those lineages, there's only one abnormality. And by abnormality, I mean like divorce, step, this or that, anything like that, half brother, half sister, you know. The community that my grandparents introduced their children into had one break, one abnormality, and my great-grandmother, my mom's mom, was actually an orphan. So when my grandparents introduced my mom and my aunts and my uncle into the world, that was the community. Just 2 generations later, it's completely different. My children won't be born knowing what they're going to do, probably not even what country they'll end up in. Because as the world continues to change at a rapid pace, uncertainty continues to increase. But in all that uncertainty, we have this thing called technology that we believe is helping us, and it's helping me shoot this video and to reach out to millions of people that would have never heard this message, apart from even greater miracles, which technology is a good thing, but we have to look at why the oldest and most aged wisdom on the planet, the baby boomers, the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, the people in that age range are at retirement homes or nursing homes, and our society is set up that way, and it's not a criticism of any individuals, especially those individuals, but that's the best wisdom on the planet. That's the most aged and refined knowledge and experience we have to draw from. And usually we're not even really connecting with them. So as much as young people are challenged by the older generations today to step up, to get work ethic, to do these type of things that I hear being complained about, especially about the millennials, the up and comings. You know, I hear the doom and gloom. What are we gonna do? Nobody wants to work. Well, I don't find that to be true. I find it to be true that our younger generation is completely confused on what to do. And I think I want to challenge the older generations to ask, do you have a connected, intimate relationship with your grandchildren, with your children? Are you talking to them on a level that allows them to be open about questions they have on any level? It's funny, down here in the South we got a joke about preachers' kids, but when I became a preacher it wasn't funny anymore. And I thought about when I was going to have kids, and I did everything from not dress up on Sundays and just wear my usual clothes so that my family would see the same person on Sunday that they saw on Saturday and Friday. I did everything from that to just looking at the people around me that I knew who had parents who were in the ministry or working at churches, per se. And there's something true about that joke. And the fact is that those kids didn't feel like they could be open with their parents a lot of times because of the level and expectations that were put on them. Even for a calling that they didn't ask for or didn't receive, but they inherited it. And in a sense, most of our parents aren't working at churches, but our family all has expectations of us, and we all have this drive to be something great, but we're not really sure what. So as the older generations communicate in facts and data and the proven path, the younger generations don't have that path. It's gone. And so as much as I appreciate it and we appreciate that path being plowed, we're going to have to ask you guys to come back and teach us how you did it, because that road's not there and we have to make our own. And that means that we measure with things like meaning and purpose and change. A lot of people my age realize that money doesn't equate to happiness. And that's been drilled into our heads for probably decades now. And when people start actually believing it and living like that, you criticize them. But here's the thing, money isn't going to make any of us happy. But we all need it to survive. And some things you wish weren't that way, but they are. And Jesus said you can't love God and money, both. And I've certainly loved both, but not at the same time. And it's by His grace that I'm even interested in doing something that's not going to make me rich. It's only by grace that I'm even interested in doing something that's not going to make me famous. Modern influencers exist, and I believe that I exist, to reconnect generations using the power of technology that helps separate them. Imagine a world where it's the best of both worlds, where granddaughter can walk up to grandmother on the porch and sit on her lap and ask her questions that only happen in that setting, but still have air conditioning and a computer and Facebook and the ability to communicate with people live streaming across the world. Because although we can't take the distance away that separated our families, we can certainly take the gap in intimacy, emotion, and connectedness. Because something I hadn't said until now was that my mom was only 18 when she had me. And she'd only been 18 for 3 months. So she was 17 and a half when she found out she was pregnant. And I was adopted by my dad. And so when I reunited with my biological father is when God really began to change my life and help me see that he had bigger plans for me and for all of us. But I say that to just say that things don't always go exactly as planned. But now's the time to start planning on how to turn the clock, to reverse the clock. Because right now technology speeds up and we move farther and farther apart from one another. And so it's not just a matter of fixing one thing, it's actually how we use our lives, how we use technology in our lives, and reversing it so that it draws us closer together and not farther apart. Because they said the internet, email, even the video chatting, all this stuff was going to pull us closer, but we're actually not using it for that. We're still using it to chase the industrial success of 3 centuries ago. We need to use it to realize that the greatest human potential is what we have to offer one another in the here and now. Help. I'm not good at asking for help, but I need it. And I figured I could write books and release albums and do all of that and do a Kickstarter for every one of them, or just hope to get published, but for just a small amount of money, a business that's already profitable, that's already debt-free, can sustain me and my family and profit these other endeavors to gain an audience to help change the world. So essentially, a small business that would be profiting me and just being for my own success isn't. It's $10,000 to fund a business that's going to fund itself and my family for the decades to come, so that when the audience is there and built up, the books can be released and the speeches can be given, and maybe it's not me, maybe it's one person who's going to see this video or is going to read one of the books that I publish in the years to come. Maybe it's just one person who's going to hear that and change everything. I don't know who it was that was preaching when Billy Graham became a Christian, but I'm sure he didn't know what was in store for him. And so I just imagine that guy dying and meeting God and, you know, seeing Billy Graham in action, and you realize, like, you may have never preached to more than 50 people, but somebody you preached to the entire world forever. So a little bit can make a large impact. Let's go.